Tell us who you
Brilliant.
are, please.
Hello, my name is Aniket. I am from the AWS Glue team. I'm a big data architect on the Glue team. We help customers do Glue stuff and then help them with integrating their ETL stuff with Glue. We help them move their data. We help them with their data lakes. We help them with all kinds of fun stuff.
I got to ask, like, what is glue stuff? I'm like, what is this?
Glue stuff is my word for, wow, this doesn't work. How can I get it to work?
I like it.
So we help them with all kinds of moving their data, doing their analysis, having their data lakes, building them out, giving them permissions, having the right people have the right access to what data they need to get to. It's fun stuff.
It's so great of you to join us, Aniket, and it's great to meet you. Thank you for being on the show, first of all.
Thank you so much for having me.
Always. A lot of challenges when it comes to big data, right? It's not the most straightforward thing. It's gotten a lot more straightforward, I got to say, over the time period that I've been aware of big data, maybe a decade or so.
For sure.
You know, we see more and more frameworks come out, more and more ways of interacting with data. And a lot of it is how do I in layman's terms, because I'm not an expert here, but, you know, a lot of it comes down to, in my opinion, how do I clean this data? How do I make sure this data is usable? And how do I move this data around, right? And I think Glue addresses both of these. How does Glue address these challenges with big data? And what do you see as some of the bigger challenges?
I think you missed one as well there. Is how do I do this at scale?
Oh, well, yeah.
Right? We're talking big data here, right?
I thought I was implied with big in the word, but you're right to call it out.
That could just be a large int. I don't know.
That's fair. No, we've definitely seen big data technologies become way more accessible, right? We used to have those days of like, I have like an on-prem Hadoop cluster on my, I'm running like Big or Uzi or just like some very technology that was like very hyped up during that day or like during those years. And now it's like, I don't even understand what this means anymore. And then it's become a lot more reachable into different sort of personas within an organization, right? Like a data scientist or a data engineer is able to access these technologies with the same ease that, let's say, a normal SDE does, or just someone who's managing the hardware does. So it's definitely become like, with more data has come more power, and with more power has come more requirement for more data, and so on and so forth, that it has just become like a cycle, and we're
I think that's a key point though, right? We've moved into this era now where we have access to so much more data that we've never had before, and the ways of working with data in like decades past, you know, don't work very well anymore because of the just sheer size of the data that we're working against.
Size, format, and then also like my org wants to use the data differently than your org, or like I don't want to show you my data, or I am
which is perfect given the discussion we just had about clean rooms, right?
Exactly. So data has become literally more than just, it's become like a weapon almost. The more data that I have and the more useful data that I can use downstream, upstream, anywhere within my pipelines, it gives my organization more power to make better decisions for whatever I'm doing. So it really has become everything that we do, one way or the other. It comes down to like, I have good data and I have better data than you, and that's why I can use it better. That's all.
I think a lot of this was enabled by, first, the decoupling of storage from compute, right? And second, the increasing affordability of storage, right? I think
for sure,
lends itself to increase these demands for data.
Definitely. And I mean, moving out the requirement for managing hardware, or like managing like my on-premise, like some machine that will die anytime something happens or overheats or something like that, it's become much easier to just click a few buttons and say, okay, I have my Glue job running now. And it's like, I don't have to care about it anymore. it's running, and
yeah.
I have reports coming from it. So
that was one of my favorite features when I first started looking at Glue. Talking decoupling compute from storage is this is going to sound really simple, but the Glue data crawler, right? You used to have compute to run it, and you used to have to connect that compute to storage to actually just crawl your data to know what's there, right?
Absolutely.
But Glue, you don't need that.
Absolutely. It can crawl it. It can crawl it. It can take your data from one place to another, and it can maintain it in a central location where you can then delegate permissions as well. So you have like a central catalog, and I can enforce different levels of like analysis on that catalog itself. I don't have to have 5 different catalogs for my 5 different teams in my company, which used to be a thing. Like it legitimately used to be a thing where it's like, I have like an H-based cluster with this fragment and this piece and something like that. It's like, you don't need that anymore. We're moving forward into a way that is, I just want to use my data, make it easier, and there's different people with different requirements, and we've addressed a lot of them with Glue.
So we got a great question. Yeah, I was going to say, we have a great question came in on the chat, actually. What are some, we've probably got a bunch of users listening to us that are not familiar with Glue before we even start talking about data quality. So what are some common use cases for Glue?
Yeah, for sure. So Glue is a serverless ETL platform. And what that simply means is I have a source of data and a destination for my data. And I want to move that data between those source and destinations. And it almost doesn't matter what my sources and destinations are. It can be an AWS service, like it can be DynamoDB, RDS, Kinesis, for that matter. We support streaming sources. Or it could be something on-premise, like I have an on-premise Oracle cluster or some IMDb V2, something very specific to my organization that I've been using for years. It doesn't matter what my source is. I can connect to that source via Glue, move that data, do my transformations, and then write my data to my destination. And again, by the same extension, as it doesn't matter what my source is, it doesn't matter what my destination is. Glue will be able to access both of those with equal ease. And then also there is an aspect of not needing to manage that compute, right? Somewhere that ETL transformation has to run. And we don't want to be there sitting and managing and patching and doing all of those small things that's like, oh, my EC2 version is now deprecated and I have to like patch it again, or this node needs to have a downtime now because it's patching day or whatever. Those days are long, and are thankfully in the rearview mirror now. So,
so we know now what Glue is. So where does data quality come in? How does that work in the overall Glue picture?
So what we did was a lot of customers reached out to us for a very similar use case, right? Like we have data somewhere. It's not necessarily always in Glue, but one of the use cases was that it was in my data catalog. And we had 2 very distinct use cases that we wanted to address, which was data at rest, which is data that is already in my data lake or in my catalog or in my RDS instances, Redshift, whatever, S3 as well. And we wanted to make sure that that is one use case. And the other was data in transit, so to say, data that's ETLing right now. And we wanted to capture that data. And these locations are exactly where data quality sits. This is where you want to know the quality of your data. You want to know the quality of your existing data, and you want to know the quality of your data before it gets into your data lakes so that I don't put in bad data into my lakes. Or if I do have bad data coming in, I want to be aware of it. I want to know that, like, this is something that is not necessary. I want to follow a different process for this data that's not correct or was going to cause business issues. So that's where we place data quality. And it makes sense to have it with an ETL service because it was so easy to sort of just add it into my ETL pipeline, essentially. It's just one more step that I have to do now, instead of having to manage a whole stack again, sort of having to set up an entire cluster or an entire process specifically for data quality. So that's why we placed it here. We're hoping it resonates with a bunch of people as well.
For sure. I think this is a very obvious question to ask, but I like asking these questions in case there's anyone else thinking these things, which there sometimes are.
Probably is.
For sure.
What happens if I do upload bad data into my data lake? Like what risks do I have? What challenges does that create?
So I remember when we had started out on data quality, it was I was like, well, why can't I just do it myself, right? Like I can just write a very easy, like an if-else statement. Like, it's just like, yeah, whatever, sure. If data is greater than 10, do something else, or data is less than 5, do something else.
Right. We
discovered that even small changes to data, like we actually had a use case where it's actually in the slides, but we had a use case where it was medical data, and it was data about infants and their weights. And based on the weight of the infant, you sort of give them a dosage for medicine, right? Like you can't give them too much because they're tiny people. And even a change of maybe 0.35% or 0.36% of an error in reporting their data weights caused a drastic issue in the amount of medication that they were given. And that caused so many downstream effects of like, well, they were given incorrect medication, or too much medication, or too less medication. And it's things like that. And this was just one example of like 35% of a change being reported incorrectly. It could be something like transactions. It could be something like sales information. It could be banking data. And once that data gets into your system, it's hard to pull it out, and it's hard to know what to do with it now that it's already flowed in. And that butterfly effect of like incorrect data, it needs to be caught before it gets in, or it needs to be known.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. Because the downstream can be so drastic, and you're down, and it's not just like I can make incorrect business decisions, right? Like this could really affect someone's like life, or it could really affect someone's ETL processes. They could get the wrong paycheck, or they could get the wrong thing to them, delivered to them. So
it might not just be a safety issue or some other issue, right? It could be you effectively, if you've got bad data in there, you're wasting resources downstream working on that bad data, right?
Absolutely.
Well, it will also deeply affect machine learning training as well, right?
Yes.
And it can make your trained models give very inaccurate predictions because the quality
machine learning, absolutely very sensitive to data and very sensitive to like outliers and things like that. So if you're feeding it wrong data or bad data, it's going to learn bad information, and it's going to give you bad results. And that's just how impactful the quality of your data is. It matters that you don't report incorrectly, and it matters that even that 0.35% is reported correctly.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old phrase, garbage in, garbage out, right?
Exactly.
The first thing you learn in computer science courses.
Are you talking about how I eat, Steve? Is that
I couldn't possibly comment?
I feel seen.
Yeah, I feel attacked, actually. So how does the AWS Glue data quality feature actually work?
Yes, that is an excellent question. So the way the Glue data quality works is we had an open source framework already within Amazon itself, and it was called DQ, BEEQU, and it was open source. It was already used at scale, and by scale I mean like petabytes of data, not just like a homegrown project or something. Amazon used BQ for a very long time, and we were like, well, this framework exists. Maybe we can improve upon it. Maybe we can incorporate it into our system, into the service already. And then that way we would have users who are already familiar with this technology, who are already using it. And we have added a bunch of enhancements to this DQ framework. So that was kind of the motivation for where DQ started. And that's where data quality came from, is this DQ framework. And we're committed to using DQ. We're going to keep expanding it as well. So it's not just that you have to use our service to use this feature. It is open source. We will be helping you out if you don't want to use our service as well. we want the customers to have their things. With that said, what we did was we got data. There was no way of representing data quality in a data agnostic way, in a way that was not language dependent. So if I was using Python, I had to represent it in sort of like a Pythonic string or some sort of like map or a hash map or something. If I was using Java, if I was using Scala, it had to be language constructs that were dependent on that language and not something that I could use across any framework. And we kind of wanted a way that we didn't have that blockage for customers. We wanted a way that was
for people using Spark sometimes, right? And Java
exactly.
or Python, right? Because a lot of it looks like Scala, but then you go to Python and you're used to, data frames and things like that, and it just doesn't look the same, right? It doesn't operate the same.
And it takes a long time for people to be like, I now have to decode the Scala code and like convert it into PySpark because my team is familiar with PySpark, or the last developer that left only wrote PySpark, and I don't know how to get that code in now. So having a language agnostic way of expressing data quality was a space that we wanted to explore and we wanted to get into. And that's the way that we currently have data quality expresses. We have our own language almost called data quality definition language, and I'll show you during the demo. And that's sort of like a very easy way of writing basic data quality rules that say something like, oh, if it's greater than this, let's do this. Or if it's less than this, let's do this. Or more complicated things like combining two conditions or joining two different tables to say, well, from my sales table and from my business logic table, I want to do a thing. So all of that was the motivation behind why data quality started. And that's how we've sort of continued the whole thing of like, with everything starts with that data quality definition. You incorporate it and you pass it on to our Glue APIs, and we'll deal with if doing it optimally. Glue uses Spark. We are based on a Spark engine, PySpark, Scala, both of them are supported. And we will do the job of distributing all of those rules more optimally, making sure that joins and things like that are happening correctly. We make sure of like that they're auto-scaled, that you only use whatever you're requiring for your hardware requirements. All of that is done for you from our side. And that's essentially the flow. Is you come in, you get sort of like a recommendation from us so that you don't have to write every single rule from scratch again. And you run these rules against your data set, and that would be essentially what it goes like.
So I want to go back to something that you said earlier on, because I'm curious about how this works as well. You said that the Glue data quality works obviously at data at rest, right? But it also work at data in transit.
Yes.
So how does it work there? What does it do when it detects bad data that's in transit?
Absolutely. So when it detects data in transit, what we're expecting is either it's something like streaming data, right? Like streaming data is always in transit, so to say. It could be something like a simple, like, a load from, I have like a daily set of files that come into S3 and it's loading my partition or something like that. So the fact that we've placed data quality right next to your ETL pipelines makes it so much easier to just be like, well, I'm just adding this one transform before the data gets read into before I do my transforms, before I do my ETL, the transformation portion of ETL, I can do this transform, which is my data quality check transform. And then before it gets into my destination, I can split it out to say, don't send this bad data in. Or if it does get sent in, make sure that it's annotated or some other logic is applied. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, you mentioned demo, which got my attention immediately because we love demos on this show.
Yes, absolutely. I will.
I like the positivity. Yes.
There is always demos, and I'm excited for demos always because it sort of paints like a real picture of like, yes, this does work. It's not just like a theoretical construct over here. So what this is just my data catalog, essentially. I have all of these databases. I have one of these databases, and this is just the NYC taxi data set. It has a bunch of values here. It is partitioned by year, bunch of data types. The data quality tab for the data at rest is right here. So you don't have to really go too far for looking for data quality. And that's why we placed it right next to the catalog. And what we're expecting most customers to do is start with a recommendation. So you say recommend rule set. We will give you an IAM option to select, and then all you have to do is say recommend rule set. What this does is it goes through your data and it gets you a basic set of recommendations to start with, so that I don't have to like dig and hunt. And this was another challenge.
Oh, just to interrupt you there. So just because people might not be familiar with that, that IAM role is giving permission for Glue to look at that data, right? Because by default,
Correct.
You can't see it.
Right. It has permissions to, oh, absolutely. It has permissions to your S3 location if you give it, if you choose to give it. Correct, absolutely. And to your data quality, like to the catalog itself. So that's the only permissions that you need. You don't, it's encrypted by default. You don't have to give it like obscenely high permissions or something.
Right.
So that's the recommendation that's generated from us. And while that's running, I'm just going to show you one that was already generated. So this one was generated.
Are you using the taxi data from the open data on AWS? I love using that data set too.
I love using that data set as well.
I wanted to call it for people who don't know that AWS has a large catalog of open data that you can utilize
absolutely
both for like realistic things that you're doing, but also like for demos, just like the one that Annik's doing right now.
Absolutely. And it's got like a bunch of it's got data types that are different. You can expect it to be like a real world interpretation of someone's data almost. So it's big and it is varied. So it's almost perfect for like a recommendation.
I always use the New York City taxi one too, though.
Yes, it's beautiful. It really is. So once the recommendation is generated from our service, this is what I was talking about for our data quality definition language. It's essentially just a blob of rules, and they're very simple to read. So I have something like row count between this and this. And these values are actually given to you by our service. So you don't have to go and sit and like execute like a count on your data set to get that value. Things like, I know my vendor ID needs to be between 1, 2, 5, or 6, or my passenger count for taxis is typically going to be less than 9. Or we have things like checks for null values, so that I know that my data cannot have null values. So I can put a completeness check. I can put checks for standard deviation to be like, well, this location ID needs to be between this and this. And I can do all kinds of things with just this rule set. Obviously, this is what is recommended by our service. If I go and say and find out that, well, I don't really need this yes or no flag check sort of thing, I would like to go and edit it. I can go back to my data set. I can go back to this rule set. And I can say, I would like to edit it. I don't want this check. We have a nice little code editor for you. You can add and see all of the rules that we do support natively, which is nice. A lot. Yeah, it's a lot of rules that this also becomes like a contention with like other services. It's like other like products that are available outside, which is like, we have like 5,000 rules. Like, do you really need the 5,000 rules? We have all of the ones that we give you that are essential, and ones that if something over here is not expressive enough, you can write your own SQL statement. We give you the power to
I was about to ask you that if one of these rules didn't fit, could you write your own?
Okay. Yes, you can write a custom SQL statement that will do whatever multiple table joins that your complicated business logic needs. And you can do all of that with just this single pane of view. And then let's say I don't want this rule. I can remove it. I don't think that rule was important, or I don't want any of these rules. I can remove them. And I can update my data set. And that's pretty much it. Once I do that, I can run evaluate dataset. I have the option to publish things to CloudWatch. I can select an IAM role, and I can say evaluate dataset, which I will click. I just wanted to show that once you do have your evaluation, you can choose to save it to S3. Once it's saved to S3, you can do things like alert on my data quality rules, or generate dashboards based on it, or run queries based on it. So a lot more flexibility opens up based on this.
Can I just ask you before, actually, you've clicked it now, but anyway, but I was going to ask you, what are those metrics that are optionally are being pushed into CloudWatch? What's available there?
Yes. So the metrics that are available are your success and failure metrics. So I can emit things like 54 rules out of 55 passed, we emit a metric saying this was the rule set, this was the data set, this was the table name, and X number of rules passed, X number of rules failed. And that itself can be used to construct like a fairly complicated alarming system.
Thinking when you said that, then I could actually attach code to those metrics to trigger and do something if the failure rate suddenly rises, for example, right?
Exactly. Or if I know that, like on an average, like 2 rules fail just because. But if 5 rules fail, that's a more serious issue.
Right.
I can do that sort of complicated logic based on this metrics being emitted.
All my data's been going for a while and everything's been good, and now suddenly there's a spike in fails. Something's gone very badly wrong upstream, right?
Right, exactly. And the other thing is, so this is what I'll wait for it to finish, obviously, but this is what the results look like for now. So I can get my rules, and I have a pass-fail condition over here saying these ones passed, and one of the ones in the future failed, I believe. So yeah, this one failed. It doesn't have completeness of column A does not exist because this column does not exist. But that's the kind of checks that we do have available for people. And this is just the static data view. So this is just for my data at rest. For my data in motion, I have, so this is the Glue Studio editor, obviously. I have a source and a sink, which is my S3 data set.
You say, I'm going to interrupt you there. You say obviously, but we've probably got a lot of viewers who've never seen this.
So, oh, that's fair. Absolutely. Let me take a step back.
What can I do in Glue Studio?
Absolutely. So Glue Studio lets you construct all of your ETL scripts, all of your jobs, and all of those things with just clicking things from the site. All I have to do is know what my source and sink is and what kind of transforms I have to do. And that is, you don't need to know a lot about code. You don't need to know a lot about, what exactly needs to go into Spark or the optimizations, or like, I want to set Spark.executor.memory. Some complicated feature. You don't need all of that. You can select the source. That source can just be S3. We support a lot of sources, obviously, but it can just be S3. It can be any relational database that you have, Redshift, Postgres. All of these are supported by default. I'm just going to select my catalog source for now. It was that data set. It was that table from that data set. And I have a target. And let's say I wanted to move it from S3 to Redshift. I have some Redshift tables over here. These ones are Redshift, I believe. So this is a very simple ETL code, which is taking my data from S3, putting it into Redshift. What I can do now is I have an additional tab over here that says evaluate data quality. Once this tab gets in, I can simply say, well, once it's, I'll put it in before this so that it doesn't, there we go.
We did have a quick question too
yes.
from chat around the data crawler specifically. What if your data set's messy, doesn't have a uniform structure? How does Glue structure your data then?
Absolutely. So if your data is in a format that is not standard, so to say, or is not as straightforward as everyone's is, what you can do is run some sort of pre-processing, because we still allow you to read your data. It doesn't matter how messed up your data is or how it is in a different format. If it can be crawled, you can crawl it. If it cannot be crawled for whatever reason, it's on-premise, it's a format that is not standard, you can still connect to that database, get it into Glue, and then we have a bunch of transforms over here that can do things like join them or change the schema or aggregate them or drop certain fields or drop duplicate fields. All of these transforms can be applied to your data source. You can make it simpler or standardize it according to your business logic. And that way we can just get your data cleaned up before applying any sort of data quality rules, or you can do it before data quality rules. All of the flexibility is in your hand. That's pretty much it. Once I do my evaluate data quality rule set, I still have the option of my rule editor here, so I can add things like column count is greater than 10. I have the option to publish to S3. I have the option to also say things like fail the job if my data quality evaluation fails, because that's another important process within the ETL pipeline, right? I have to make a business decision now. if my data quality is below a certain threshold. And if that decision has to be fail this entire job, I want to get notified of it, I can do that right here. I can even say things like, don't fail the job, but make sure that at least the data gets loaded so that you don't miss out on the data. So that's all of the things that you can do from here. You can output your data quality results and make more analysis steps over here from that data quality. So all of the flexibility is provided for you right from the studio experience. You can do a whole lot more. You can keep adding more targets, obviously. You can keep adding more transforms. Yep.
One more question from chat, if you don't mind, on a kid.
Absolutely.
So this is specifically about Airflow, but this person also asks, do I need any other orchestrator?
I see.
But they're asking Postgres to DMS to Redshift. But what do you have to say in general about orchestration? Glue's doing the orchestration for you, right?
Glue's doing the orchestration for me over here. Absolutely. We have things like triggers. We have things like CloudWatch events, or if it's more of like an event-driven pipeline, you can use Event Bridge to just be like, I want to capture this event of a file coming into S3 or something like that, or my data getting uploaded, or I want to run something at 10 o'clock every day. That all of that functionality will be provided. You don't need another Airflow or something like that. I would still say if there is some sort of like business attachment to Airflow, we do have Airflow as well. So it's not a hard and fast requirement to have orchestration done necessarily via Airflow, even for that use case that was mentioned.
Nice. And then for the actual data structures that are generated or that you're even creating, I would say any version control options for the structure of your data in loading, combining the data sets.
Right. So we do have versions of your data set in tables. So for example, I have this table and I have a version of this table. So if I load another data set, it will create a new version. When I express, like when I run my data quality, it will run on the latest version if I want to. If I don't want to, it can run on a previous version as well. And that's kind of the way of how we provide you to go back and almost look at your data if you want to. If I know that this was not a great version that I didn't really want, I can go back and just say, well, run on version 0 instead of version 1. So that's, yeah. We also have code version. So we do have version control itself, if that's what people are talking about. So we do integrate with Git and code commit and things like that. So your code is also versioned along with your data. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Great questions. Love the questions too.
Keep
Absolutely. Absolutely. Keep them coming. And then obviously once that's essentially the journey that a user would take with data quality. Once the data quality is established over here, I would save my job, save the information over here, name my job something, if it updates. Oh, come on.
Untitled job is a perfectly good job name.
I agree. I don't think my browser agrees though. Oh, there you go. Well, it does say something now. Excellent. We've got the retries, and then I can just save this job. Oh, I am. Once this job runs, there is a data quality tab right here. So I will have a very similar view that I had over here with my results, with the exact panel. I'll go back to the one that actually did that. But I will have the same result presented over here as well. So that's the entire experience for data quality that we have right now. We're working on multiple features. So if y'all any involvement, anything that would help us, that would be awesome. Oh, I did not select the database and table. Oh, come on.
This is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And we actually had a lot of customers reach out to us and say things like, well, this was exactly what we were developing, but it was something that we were making in-house. And it was something that we were making like a custom solution for exactly one person who knows what data quality is for their business logic. And we were writing like a separate class for this and making it into like a whole thing with like, well, if data or like trip time greater than 10 do this, or if like, a lot of like custom implementations. And once that person leaves, no one knows about these things.
Right.
Or there is no standardization for rules, or there is no way that I can actually know that this is the central location for data quality. And now you can do it. Now you have the ability to have quality enforced across all of your data sets. So that's the motivation that sort of put us on this path for making data quality.
Nice.
Yeah. Whilst this job runs. Oh, I did not even type that. Please run.
Please run.
Pretty please.
I find that technology often works better when you're very polite to it.
So. Yes.
Yes, I will 100% agree with that analysis.
When I yell at it, it actually usually doesn't work. So
that sounds about right.
And oftentimes I just yell at myself for writing like bad code. So stare into a mirror.
That's allowed.
That's allowed.
I yell at you for writing bad code as well. So
yes, you do. Yes, you do all the time, Steve. Really motivates me. Thank you.
That's what I'm here for, just to motivate you.
Absolutely. The other thing that I wanted to show really quickly was the script tab. We generate all of this code for you. You do not have to know what PySpark is or what like complicated Spark optimizations are and things like that. We do all of this for you. The more visual components you keep adding, the more script gets updated with all of those parameters, with all of those optimizations. It's all going to get built in for you. So that's.
May I just ask? And this may be obvious. I'm not sure, but that script at the top, it says script locked. Is that because we're just not in some kind of edit mode, or is it because that's something that we're generating and we expect you to take a copy of it if you want to edit?
Absolutely. So if the locked mode is because the visual editor is connected to it. So if I keep adding more components, it's because the visual editor, like if I add like a bunch of custom code over here, the visual editor will not know how to render that code necessarily in like that DAG formation.
Right.
That's the reason that it says locked. It's not locked because it's like uneditable. I actually can just unlock it. Like it just loses the visualization.
It disconnects with the visual editor. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's literally it. And that's I see.
Hey, it's live! Yay!
I know, right? Jeez, come on. I think I just messed up on the data quality node. One second. In the script, I see. It just didn't have a column count or something like that. So that I will undo that and rerun it if you want. I'll uncheck all of these things. Oh, it failed because I told it to fail. Hey, that was expected.
You said fail, right?
So, yeah. I checked the box for it. It could fail, and that's exactly why it failed. Right. I'll save it and run it again. But
okay. Well, while you run it, another question came in on chat. Not a technical, more hypothetical. So if there's data discontinuity between multiple departments, right? There's some disarray in the data that's been shared. Can Glue help make that data more uniform? I'd imagine yes, but
yeah, absolutely. So in this scenario, I'm imagining a lot of your data is already in S3. Even if it's not, we have a lot of this available or accessible. And once that data is accessible to Glue, all you need to do is just read that data from our code descriptors. Again, it doesn't have to be from here. I can write my own code to read the data as well. This is just an easy way to write that data. And once I do get it into Glue, I can do things like standardize it. I can do things like make sure that a particular schema is enforced on that data, clean out those columns that are not relevant to me, or date formats is like probably one of the most annoying things across organizations. Like I entered the date here in this format, whereas my point of sales terminal has entered the date in a completely different format or an epoch time or whatever. And I want to go back and forth between those.
All of that is quite a widespread problem, actually. We think about how data has grown and how companies grow, over years, decades, whatever. Data formats change, right? They drift, etc. I'd imagine there's an awful lot of data in disarray, shall we call it, right, out there that this can potentially help with.
Exactly. And that's something that just raises the use cases for data quality.
Yeah.
That just sort of makes it a little more important that data quality itself is enforced. And also, hey, your data is your data. Sometimes there is just no way to change my input vendor's data. It has to be in XML. It has to be in this weird format. We just don't know how to make it better. It's fine. You can still get it into our system and you can still organize it. And it's definitely possible. And again, it doesn't have to be data on S3. It doesn't have to be data on AWS sources even. You can pull out data from outside sources as well. We have connectors, we have marketplaces, we have things that go to, let's say, MongoDB or Dynamo or Kinesis or any other streaming sources. So all of that is present.
Unfortunately, we've got to wrap up and move on to our next, but we're still talking about Glue in our next segment.
Yeah.
So,
that is true.
There you go.
That is true. You can choose your favorite Glue new region launch. It's a new product between the two of us.
It's impossible to pick a favorite. They're all my Anyway, thank you so much for joining us on the channel, Anikit, and we can't wait to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See ya.